Hey guys, it's War, and I was playing my game earlier, having a blast, and I've been playing this game for the past 9 months, and I have not made any progress. And so I was thinking, I must have plateaued. Man, how did I plateau? Like, I play every day, you know, I put all my effort in. How am I plateaued, right? And then today, as I was playing, I realized it's a myth. Plateauing is completely a myth. It does not actually exist. People don't actually plateau. That's what society wants you to believe. Society wants you to believe that people do plateau. Because it benefits their ego, right? Because they weren't successful, right? Average Joe, you take Joe, and no one in particular. He's average and he's not successful, right? It's a result of his own failures, right? It's an internal thing. It's not the system, and it's not his disadvantage. It's not pre-given disadvantage. Okay? It's his result. Because if you plateau, then in his mind, it reinforces the fact that he's not successful because of the system, because of how he was born, because he's not smart enough, he's not skilled enough, he doesn't have talent, right? It's reasons not in his control. And he wants to believe that so that he can keep going. Because he can't accept the fact that the reason he's not successful is because he didn't make the effort to be successful. Right? So this thing, plateauing, was created as for a reason for people to give up. And it's become a system. It's become rooted in culture, rooted in society. And so you will see people who are partially successful, or they're having a good time. And then they hit a wall, right? And then they plateaued. And that's it. They can't get better. There's no future for them. This idea, this principle, I actually call it the outplay principle, and I go into it in a different video. Make sure to watch that. But back to the reason why plateauing does not exist. Because you may be thinking that, well, even though, sure, that's a reason to keep going, but your skill does still stop, right? And then it raises and it stops again for over a long period of time, you know? So you're still plateauing, right? And the answer is that's not the case. Skill at something is not a result of mechanical execution, right? And most people will say it is, or most people will want to believe it is. But it's actually entirely a result of the pieces that make up the puzzle, right? So that's, in essence, that's the easiest way to say it. This does vary for different things, but for example, if you are solving a Rubik's Cube, speed cubing, then the best way to solve a Rubik's Cube, I mean, it's exactly in the moves that go into the solve, you know, and it's not just the actual moves on paper, but also in real time, the speed. For someone to gain skill at something, whether it be a game or real life, a trade, you know, career, even a stand-up comedian is an example. Making YouTube videos could be an example. There is tiers of skills, right? And I like to look at video games because they're very easy to objectively analyze, right? And if you look at a leaderboard, there's clearly a rank 1 and a rank 2 and a rank 3. If you look at the videos, making YouTube videos, it's all over the place, right? And you could argue rank 1 subscribes guy, you know, PewDiePie, you could argue that he's doing the best. And I you know, in that I strongly believe he is at the very least in his own right? But it is a little bit more subjective. So in a game, if you aren't as good as someone, right, you're not quite at their tier level, then almost always, right, and here it does vary, and it's with extremes it varies a lot, so you have to watch out for that stuff, but almost always in general, the difference between tiers is not a mechanical thing, it's almost always an understanding thing. And actually I'll go even farther to say that most mechanical ability is a result of understanding the game, right? Because it is all a part of the game at the end of the day. And most people will say, no, you know, you need required tech skill. And actually that is not the case. You don't need required tech skill for something. You need, the only thing that is required for someone is intrinsic. As in, you have the only thing that's required for someone is that thing itself, right? But the thing about understanding a game is because games, and most things in real life, but games are highly complex systems, right? And it's not just the fact that it's the game itself, right? And it'd be played by a computer. It's a person that has to translate to the game, right? So it's not just the game itself, but it's also the translation, which is the inputs on the controller, your brain, and how you function as a human with the game. And so it's highly complex, right? And so a lot of understanding is actually deeply rooted in the brain, and it's impossible or nearly impossible to put in words. Point of this is that the understanding, it internally builds over a long period of time. And when you start out at something, and obviously it's an initial burst and that'll vary, but when you start out at something, you just see rapid success. And you know, for example, for speedrunning, if you speedrun, play a game with a timer, just play through the game with a timer, you're going to constantly get a new personal best every day or every week, you know, just after eventually you hit a plateau, right? I hit a plateau. That's where most people think, oh, I've plateaued, you know, and then what's the best way to get over a plateau? People come up with all the crazy ideas, but the reality is just keep playing the game because you actually did not plateau. What's actually happening is your brain is trying to figure out the next level of understanding, right? In combination with another human trait where people generally, they either want to perform really well or they want to fail, and so it looks like they perform really well. And I mentioned earlier, I called that the outplay theory, outplay principle. Watch my video on that. And so over a long period of time, they will never get a new personal best. And also, their brain hasn't quite figured out how to work the game better. Because in speedrunning, and this does translate to other games and the rest of life, in speedrunning, what happens is, let's say you have a 2-hour time, and the next step is a 1 hour and 59 minute time, right? And so that's like, you want to get a 159, you're really trying to do it, but you can't quite do it, right? You just keep failing. Thing is, there's a limited number of ways to get a 159, right? And it's the same with a 2-hour time. I mean, it's almost infinite, right? I mean, in technical terms, but truth is, there is a limited way. And if you look at your first run, let's say your first run is a 3-hour time. In order to get a 3-hour time, there's a lot of attainable different ways to get that time. And what I mean by that is within the game, if you make a mistake, you lose a bunch of time, right? Or if you get really bad RNG, you lose a bunch of different time, right? And so what happens is, in order to get a 3-hour time, there's a ton of different possible outcomes that can get you that time, or something, you know, within a 5-minute variable, right? But as you get better at the game, or as you get lower time, rather, you lose those. There's less paths to get that right. You can't get there through certain outcomes. Certain outcomes would you lose too much time to get. So as it gets harder, there's less and less outcomes. It funnels down as you get better at the game. But when you get to about a very tight timing, that the paths for that time become extremely tight, right? And what happens is it's still a very possible thing, and it's not technically a difficult thing because it is simply a video game, right? And so as you improve, you actually understand the game more and understand how to get that time more. Your times are going to go down gradually, right? And at a very high level, what happens eventually is you have to start studying the game, researching strats. You have to start putting a lot of effort into labbing and really figuring out how the game exactly works. But also, you have to understand how the run works, because what happens is there's only so many different paths in order to get whatever goal time you're trying to get. And so if you don't understand how that works in order to get the next time, it seems like you plateau, right? Because you can't improve. You can't beat your time, because what happens is you keep doing runs and runs and runs that will stay at that time range that you get. And so it does look like you plateau, like you won't, over a period of 6 months, you will see no improvement, right? But what happens, your brain is still making connections, and more importantly, it's looking for that next path in order to get whatever your goal time is. And this does translate to other games and other aspects of life. So eventually you break past the wall. And here's the important thing when you break past the wall. It's not because you grinded for 6 months straight. It's because you got an understanding, a new appreciation of the important aspects of the game that matter. And you got a new understanding of the game that allow you to achieve one of those paths in order to get a better time, right? And a lot of people think that maximizing their gameplay is the best thing. That's how you get to the next step, right? But again, that's not really the case. It's more about understanding what's important, understanding what matters, understanding the game in itself in its purest form, and then understanding the run if you're speed running or doing something with a similar time, understanding the run, and then what happens is you'll get a better time because you're a better player. And a lot of that understanding, it's not about maximizing your time, it's more about finding the right path, right? Because you're looking at a tree with infinite branches, and it's not really about picking the longest branch or picking the latest branch or the tallest branch. Now you have to pick the right branch that goes around the right path to get to the squirrel or whatever. So, guys, I hope you like my little discussion about why plateauing does not actually exist. It is a concept made up in order for people to lose, and it is also an effect that just it's untrue. It's dishonest. There's actually more going on. Your brain is making processes. It is making connections while you're in plateau. So, guys, if you dislike the video, leave this like the video and make sure you comment because I love talking about this stuff. I want to hear your opinions on it. And I'm getting out of here, guys. Also, you've been recorded.